Hi, back for part two of forest fires. There's so much I could cover in this short PowerPoint and screencast, but I need to just give you some more terminology, and then I want to cover four things, and that is defensible space, prescribed burn, fire regime, and fire suppression. So let's start with this before we talk about those topics. There's three different kinds of fires: a ground fire, a surface fire, and a crown fire. Pretty good pictures of each of those. There's three different kinds of fuels that cause those fires, contribute to those fires: ground fuels, surface fuels, and aerial fuels. Now, this is important for fire ecology and also fire suppression. So if you look at this diagram, the greater the distance between the surface fuel, which includes the grass, logs, twigs, fallen branches, and low-lying foliage, and the tree crowns, the more difficult it is for crown fires to start. So the branches in between the crown and the surface fuel are called ladder fuels. So you need to know that. And so periodic fires spread through the surface fuel. The surface fire cannot make the leap to the tree crowns, and the fire consumes small plants, but taller trees escape with scorched bark. So that's an important principle for historic fires versus the catastrophic wildfires that we're having now. Fire regime is the historical intervals of fires in the past. So if you look at the Douglas fir ponderosa pine in the lower montane, historically, frequent surface fires at low severity and low intensity occurred with small patches of crown fire and tree mortality. Now, if you look at the red over to the right of that, fire suppression practices have produced a forest structure that's more conducive to crown fire, and fire reoccurrence is 10 to 20 years. So you can look at each of the life zones here. And remember, you can pause the screencast whenever you want just to stay on a slide. And look at the fire regime in the different life zones. And also, this story is told again in the fire scars that we see when we take a core sample or we look at a tree cross section. So this is where we get the information of historical fire regime. And our goal now is to make the forest as much like it was naturally before humans and mimic these natural disturbances instead of suppressing the fire and having catastrophic wildfire. The next thing is defensible space. And defensible space is the area around your home or structures which is either man-made or natural, where the vegetation is modified and maintained to slow the rate and intensity of an advancing wildland fire. Now, you have to think about this. It's very dangerous for a forest firefighter to come in and save your dream mountain cabin. So it's even more intense if you have not practiced defensible space. In the past, neighborhoods that were up in the mountains would paint a purple rock and put it at the end of their driveway, which signified that they had done defensible space practices on their houses or cabins and that it was worth trying to save. The driveways that didn't have a purple rock, the firefighters would drive by because it was too much effort and it was dangerous to their lives. So this defensible space provides room for the firefighters to work and helps protect the forest from becoming involved should a structural fire occur. So if you can see this diagram, it's pretty good. Spacing of plants, lowering low tree limbs removed, trees trimmed away from the house and the chimney, and trees spaced. This next slide is a very short version of guidelines. If you live out in the mountains and you have a structure, you should be practicing defensible space, and you should have the notebook called Firewise from Larimer County and the Colorado State Forest Service that teaches you these practices in much more detail. So guidelines: thinning out tree and brush cover, disposing of slash after thinning, removing dead limbs, stack firewood uphill or on a contour. A lot of people stack their firewood on their deck. Very dangerous. Maintain a green belt, mow dry grass, prune branches to remove ladder fuels, trim branches that extend over eaves of roofs, clean the gutter of pine needles and leaves, reduce density of surrounding forest at least 100 feet from your structure, thin the trees so there is 10-foot crown spacing, and do this annually. This is a really good diagram, I think, of what it should look like before and what it should look like after. So use this as a visual picture when you're thinking of defensible space. There's a lot of companies that started up that do this for a living, but you can also do it on your own structure or cabin. The next one is prescribed fire. Prescribed burn is a fire that's ignited and managed by trained personnel with predetermined fuel and weather conditions. And again, this chart shows you the anatomy of a prescribed burn, where it's ignited, where the head fire is. There's tons of technicalities to fighting a forest fire, but the basic of this is that to create a managed forest, prescribed burn is one of the techniques, but it has to be done safely and it has to be done properly. So unfortunately, the only prescribed burns that make it into the news are the ones that got out of control. If you're following all the prescriptions for a burn like this, we used to call it a controlled burn, it won't get out of control, and it is very healthy for the forest. It can prepare a logged area for reforestation. It can enhance wildlife habitat. It can protect native plant species, control insect populations or disease, and reduce fire hazards by reducing burnable fuels. If I hear about a controlled burn this fall, I'll definitely, or spring, I'll definitely let you know about it, and we can learn more about it or go visit it before and after. We also used to do inventory on these plots to see what the change was and to monitor actually the effectiveness of this technique. Fire suppression is the last one that I want to talk about today. So fighting wildfires, if you want to be on a wildfire crew, there's Larimer County, Hotshot Crews, U.S. Forest Service, and they all require a red card. We have these classes offered at Front Range Community College. S-130 is the firefighter training, and S-190 is wildland fire behavior. And we also, both fall and spring, offer the Sawyer class, which is S-212, which is a nice tie-in for your forestry, especially if you've had field research and practice more of those field techniques, and if you'd like to be a Sawyer on a fire crew. Fighting wildfires includes fire breaks and backfires and helicopters dropping buckets of water. Contained versus controlled. Contained means it has a fire line around it and it's not spreading. A controlled fire is completely out and no longer smoking. So we use bulldozers, we use orange slurry, we use all kinds of different techniques, but this is just another graphic of fighting fires. And the intensity, severity, and frequency is dependent on the climate, the vegetation, the disturbance history, and the elevation. So a friend of mine is the incident commander on fires for Larimer County, and he has to take all of these things into consideration when he starts calling his crews up and making a tactic for fighting that wildland fire. Also, the moisture content of the fuels are described as 1-hour fuels, 10-hour, 100 hours, and there's a typo, 1,000-hour fuels, which are 3-inch to 8-inch diameter, and that fuel moisture content is the rate of drying. So that also increases your knowledge of what to expect with the fire. The impact of fire suppression over the years, and especially ponderosa pine forest fires, is due to suppression as a policy, drought, insects, and disease, logging and reforestation, and the result of that has been catastrophic wildfire instead of wildfires that are healthy to the forest. So if you look at this graphic, I've always thought this tells a pretty good story. This is the natural forest of 150 years ago, and it talks about the large pines, the crown fires, surface fires started by American Indians, spacing. This is what the forest used to look like. Stop and read this if you want to take an extra minute. And this is what the modern forest looks like. So first species have moved in. There's more high intensity stand killing fires. There's the aftermath, the crown fire. And so this is what we've been dealing with. High accumulation of woody debris and ladder fuels are two more. So stop and read this if you can. And last but not least, where do we go from here? Here's the 3 answers to that question. We can fight fire with prescribed fire. We can mechanically remove fuel buildup. And we can defuel the wildland-urban interface. My favorite one is letting fires burn. And this summer there was a fire on the Wyoming border, and we actually did not have structures or human lives in the path. And so we did get to watch that fire burn. You might choose that one as your assignment for this week's assignment. So what should future forests look like? Well, this is a good example of a thinning. This is what forests used to look like in the past with this nice density and spacing. And this is what forest management practices are looking for as a goal and objective in their management plans.